Castle controlled the entrance to a harbour and the southern part of the county. The two small towers on the hillside were originally built as leading marks to guide boats into the river mouth. Dunbeath Castle, which is still lived in, was of strategic importance to the southern approaches of Caithness. The first mention of a castle is in 1387, and it became part of the Sinclair strongholds in the 1500s. Brim's Castle is a mid-16th century tower which had a stair wing added to it. It was modified and enlarged in the late 18th century. Like Brim's, the Castle of May was a Sinclair stronghold built in 1570 by the Earl of Caithness for his second son. The Sinclairs of May became Earls of Caithness in 1789. The coat of arms above the gateway on the seaward side of the castle has the initials of the then owner, Sir John Sinclair of May. On the landward side is the ER monogram of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, the present owner of the castle. Keys Castle, like Gurnago, perched on top of the cliff, was built in about 1590 for the eldest son of the Earl of Caithness. The new house was built about 1755 for Sinclair of Dunbeth. It was enlarged in 1860. Dounreay Castle was built before 1590 and has long been the stronghold of the Sinclairs. About 1860, the last occupant was a Mrs. Sinclair, an elderly eccentric who was a familiar figure in the district, and she travelled about in her distinctive means of transport, a coach drawn by 2 oxen. Thurso East was built by George, Earl of Caithness, in 1664. It was destroyed by Sinclair of Keys when it fell into the hands of Campbell of Glenorchy after the Battle of Ultimalach in 1680. Freswick Castle is built on the site of an earlier Viking fortification. The present building is said to date from 1760. Of all the Sinclair castles in Caithness, the massive complex of Gurnago, which is the most spectacular ruin in this part of Britain, was the stronghold of the Earls of Caithness. Located 3 miles north of Wick, it is dramatically and grandly situated on a long, narrow rock with perpendicular faces projecting into Sinclair Bay and the North Sea. The rocky peninsula, rising 60 feet above the sea, runs diagonally to the mainland and is separated from it by an arm of the sea known as a go or voe. This is a Norwegian word and means a rocky inlet or a deep ravine that admits the sea. On this was built between 1476 and 1496 the Impregnable Castle Gurnago, on what appears to be the site of an earlier Viking fortification. The construction was of local stone, of which some would have been quarried when building the ditches. With the exception of the red sandstone lintels and cornerstones that probably came from Freswick to the north. The main part of the building was a keep 3 or 4 stories high, protected from a mainland attack by 2 great ditches, one of 20 feet and the other of 14 feet out into the peninsula. The walls of Gernigo appear to rise seamlessly out of the perpendicular cliffs, and it is a superb testament to the builders of Gernigo that through siege, cannon and 500 years of North Sea storms it endures today. The main entrance is an arched passage on the west side. It was accessed from the gatehouse situated between the 2 ditches. It was accessed from the land on which Sinclair Castle now stands by a drawbridge. The corbels for supporting the bridge still exist. Below ground level there is a well room with a spring long covered over, providing essential fresh water. Also underground there is a dungeon, and these rooms are vaulted in contrary directions, and the whole of the ground floor is also vaulted. The window over the main entrance was an oriel window supported on corbelling, with mullions and transoms and a sloping stone roof, at the apex of which there was a carved stone of the crest of the Earls of Caithness. Adjoining in the north wing is another room, in which there is an access door in the floor to an arched room about 7 feet high, set above the former kitchen vaults. Its existence is impossible to detect from outside, and thus provided a strong room with great security. Along the north wall can be seen the corbels which supported a long brettash. This was a wooden structure along which people could walk, and was used for defensive purposes. To the seaward side of the keep were a number of outbuildings, being 1 or 2 stories high, with either a passage or a courtyard between them. At the extreme end of the promontory, and some 15 feet below the general level, is a stepped accessway cut out of the rock down to the sea on the north side, which, as in the maritime nature of all the northern castles, allowed for provisioning in the event of siege. For 20 years William maintained his position at Gernigo, and also started to build a castle at Mckinnon. This was probably on the same site that Einar had built his castle many years earlier. This was to protect his lands from invaders across the Ord of Caithness and with the border to Sutherland. But he answered James IV's call to arms against the English, and marched from Gernigo with 300 men to Flodden in 1513. Unlike some who fled from the field, he stood his ground at the head of his men, all of whom were killed. The Earl with his men, attired in green, had crossed the Ord on a Monday on their way south, and for many years no Sinclair would cross it on that day wearing green. As was often the case in these times, the accommodation offered by the keep was insufficient for the new requirements. So, in about 1606, a further castle, known as Sinclair Castle, was built on the land to the west of the keep and between the 2 great ditches. Once again access was provided across a drawbridge from the mainland, and the castle was architecturally more sophisticated than Gernigo, with finely carved corbels from supporting angle windows and turrets. Gernigo was built for strength, but Sinclair was built for beauty. Although known by 2 names, it was all one great single dwelling. Continuous feuds with the local clans, the Sutherlands and Mackays, are a hallmark of these times, and fortune swung from one side to the other. George Sinclair, who built Sinclair Castle, found that money was increasingly a problem, and the story goes that he engaged his own coiner, Arthur Smith, and for 7 or 8 years minted his own money in a secret location within Gernigo. By the mid to late 1600s, the Caithness fortunes had waned and the debts were increasing with the large estates encumbered. Many of the family homes were damaged by Cromwell's troops. When George Sinclair, the 6th and 44th Earl of Caithness, died, one of his principal creditors, James Campbell of Glenorchy, seized the estates, assumed the title, and married George's widow. The rightful heir, George Sinclair of Keese, immediately contested this. Glenorchy marched north, and in 1680 the last clan battle was fought at Dortimarlach. The day before the battle, the Campbells wilfully stranded a ship containing a large amount of whisky near Wick. This prize was duly seized by the Sinclairs, who set about enjoying the spoils. With the Sinclairs not in the best state to fight a battle and not as well trained, the next day's contest proved one-sided. George Sinclair, however, did not give up and continued to harry Glenorchy. Before he was granted the earldom, he attacked Glenorchy's garrison at Gernigow in 1690. This time Gernigow was besieged with cannon, and for the first and only time in its history, the castle was taken, ironically by one of its own. In the bombardment, Sinclair Castle took the worst of the assault and was virtually destroyed. Gernigow, though hugely stronger, was finally heavily damaged. With a number of other castles in which to live, George, the 7th and 45th Earl, did not rebuild Gernigow, which was never again inhabited. On this natural site for a fortification, the Sinclairs built the great stronghold of Gernigow. It was the Sinclairs who destroyed the great stronghold of Gernigow, and it is the task in the new millennium to preserve this great stronghold for future generations to see. This is the work for the Clan Sinclair Trust.